That Sexy Nerd is back again. And we're watching, I thought I'd do something a little special for you guys. We're going to watch another breakdown for Rings of Power because I really need a little bit more faith in this show because, again, I don't see any congruency with some of the. A subscriber actually had pointed that out to me. That's probably why I'm having some issues and like getting into the some of the things of the because at first I was like yeah, but this last trailer I'm like I'm not excited at all. So hopefully we're gonna have my boys at Nerd of the Rings break it down for all of us because man, that guy is he taught me most of the stuff I know about Tolkien. Even though I did eventually pick up the Silmarillion, I did. I learned a lot from him about the first age and the second age, and especially the first age. And that's really all I want to see in this show because we're never. When the hell are we going to have a Silmarillion show? It's just right there. Why the second age? The Silmarillion is. I mean, the first age is still a massively entertaining book, and all the stories from them are amazing. Yeah, it'd be hard to focus on more than one character, but I mean, come on, man, it's right there. But anyway, let's not get into that right now. Let's just get into the breakdown. And remember, please like and subscribe if you want to see more sexy and nerdy content. And let's do this thing, y'all.
Hey guys, so we got what I'm guessing is probably a final trailer for Rings of Power, since the release is just over a week away. But we've actually got a good number of new shots and some new dialogue in this one, so let's break it all down. We start off with the shot of Finrod in battle we've seen a handful of times.
Finrod, yes.
Followed by the shot of Galadriel mourning his death. Galadriel says her brother gave his life hunting the enemy, and that task is now hers. Now, Beren and Luthien fans will know that this quote seems a bit odd, as Finrod wasn't so much hunting anyone, but helping Beren in his quest for a Silmaril when he's captured by Sauron. He does, however, fight Sauron in an epic battle of song. And for newbies, I'm not kidding at all. You can check out my Finrod video where I talk about this. Back to the trailer though, we have a couple distinct marks on Finrod. As noted in the last trailer, he's got scratches that would match up with his book death by wolves in the dungeons of Sauron's fortress of Tol Gauroth. But the one that is most interesting is when Galadriel takes his Two Trees dagger. We see Finrod is branded with the same symbol we've seen on the ice slab and the sword shard from earlier posters and teasers. I've made this point before that while we've previously seen it oriented the other way, I think this might actually be its proper orientation, and that this could be either an early symbol for the Eye of Sauron, or another intriguing theory is that this is a map of the mountains surrounding Mordor, which I think would make this peak on the central line Mount Doom. It's just a theory, but perhaps we'll find out when this thing actually premieres. Next, we get previously seen shots of Númenórean ships and Galadriel stepping on one of these ships in the armor we were told at Comic-Con is a gift. I'm guessing from the Númenóreans themselves. Galadriel says, "Stand with me. Ours was no chance meeting." And while based on the later portions, Halbrand is likely the one she's talking to, it's also possible it could be someone she meets along the journey to Númenor, like Miriel, or the man in the next shot, Elendil. Speaking of which, we get this shot of Elendil looking stricken as petals from the white tree fall around him. And for as much focus as has been on Galadriel for the elves and Durin for the dwarves, Elendil is a character I'm really hoping this show gets right, as the span of this show will essentially tell his life story all the way to his heroic death. Just as the Fall of Númenor storyline rests on the shoulders of Pharazôn, the storyline of the faithful and the survival of the exiles rests on Elendil's. Next, a shot of Durin IV turning around in front of closed doors. No idea what's actually happening, but it kinda seems like Durin has something serious on his mind. So maybe this is the moment the dwarves discover Mithril, or this is when news of the cave-in reaches the king or something. And yes, I'm still not a fan of simultaneous Durins, but I will say I really like the theory out there that Durin III is a vision which Durin IV sees. Who knows how they've worked out this Durin situation, but I definitely have my eyes on it. Now, I don't always pay a whole lot of attention to trailer dialogue because it's usually a lot of, whoa, this is a bad sign, or evil sure is bad and we have to stand against it, or we have to rally together and do real good stuff. But this line and the accompanying downbeat of the music was interesting to me. As Galadriel says, ours was the work of something greater, which presumably means the chance that she would end up either shipwrecked with Halbrand or coming to Numenor. We get a shot of Halbrand, and between the look on Halbrand's face, the slow fade out, and the dramatic beat, I don't know, it just seems kind of shifty to me. And
Right.
while Galadriel may mean something greater, as in the work of Eru, I think perhaps this is all the work of Sauron himself, who being a Maiar would be categorized as something greater. Another theory out there is that Halbrand will become the Witch King, so we'll see what happens. Next we
Really?
see a wide shot of the elven children playing that we've seen before, and I believe the next shot is indeed from the same scene, as we have this rock formation just right of the center of the frame that seems to match up. If that's the case, then we have what are believed to be a group of people who are devoted to Melkor, so presumably this one with the staff could be a priestess of Melkor or something. Whatever's
Really?
happening here, it sure seems the elven children are not in a good spot, and that is why you don't let your kids play in Middle-earth unattended. As for what followers of Morgoth might be doing, I suppose one possibility is this is a flashback to days when Morgoth was actually around, but the world seems kind of bright and happy for that to be the case. I wonder if instead these folks, whose boss is now locked up by the Valar, are instead looking for the coming of a second Dark Lord. And in the meantime, they're gonna cause trouble. Quick wide scenery shot and we get the Stranger, aka Meteor Man, standing among a pack of what I believe are wargs or wolf-like creatures.
They're Intelligons.
We can just barely see that Nori is hiding behind him, so he's presumably protecting her from the wargs. At this point, I'm really pulling for this guy to be a blue wizard, but I'm kind of nervous they're setting him up to be Gandalf. Personally, I would just prefer Blue Wizard as they're far less explored as characters, and the fact that the blue wizards appearing in the Second Age would fit right in with Tolkien's later writings. Never mind, of course, the whole crashing to Middle-earth in a meteor thing. In this scene, I think this perhaps will be the first time we see him use some of his powers. And it does remind me a bit of when the Fellowship is cornered by wargs prior to entering Moria in the books. And Gandalf does some cool stuff like set fire to one of Legolas's arrows. Quick shot of Gil-galad standing in the forest, and we're on to Numenor. Here we get some previously heard dialogue from Miriel, but what is interesting in this scene is that Pharazôn is standing across from Miriel, also elevated from the crowd. Considering the dialogue, I can't help but think this might be the moment when Pharazôn decides to stand against Miriel and begin his efforts to seize control of Numenor with his King's Men faction. By this time in the history of Numenor in the books, the majority of Numenor has long since turned their backs on the elves and the Valar. But I wonder if this is the moment where Miriel realizes that it's Pharazôn who has the hearts of the people. Previously seen shots of Isildur on his Numenorian ship and Arondir walking in the Tirharad village follow. And we also see a shot of Arondir pulling off his hood. We learned in one of the recent promo materials that the elves kind of oversee these lands, which are populated by the people, or rather descendants of the people, who were loyal to Morgoth in the First Age, which causes tension between them and the elves who guard the lands. It's just a hunch, but I think we're gonna see some cool stuff from Arondir in this series. Ismael Cruz Cordova definitely seems to bring an intensity which I think will be cool to see from an elf. Next is a little sequence where Halbrand says, "I'm not the hero you seek," followed by a shot of
Halbrand?
him on the shipwreck, followed by Galadriel telling him, "Whatever it is you did, be free of it." And not to go down too much of a hypothetical rabbit hole, but if Halbrand is Sauron, I really hope this is him playing 3D chess against the peoples of Middle-earth.
Maybe.
And we aren't getting the, "Oh, poor bad guy is a bad guy because of sympathetic reasons" tale. If Halbrand turns out to be the Witch King, this would be a much more interesting take and
That
makes a
would be
lot more
cool.
sense. But if he is indeed Sauron, I think he should just be busy playing everyone for fools and manipulating pieces on the board to rule Middle-earth. Next,
He needs to be manipulating the elves at this time if they're going to do the whole thing with Celebrimnoir. So, yeah, please do.
we get Disa telling Durin IV that one day Khazad-dûm will be his kingdom, followed by a landscape shot of a ton of waterfalls. Here's a repeat shot of Elrond being escorted into Khazad-dûm by dwarf guards. Then a quick glimpse of a new shot of Durin III sitting on his throne. Next we have a shot of the leaves of the white tree coming off, and for the first time we see Galadriel reacting to it. I think we've now seen Miriel, Elendil, and Galadriel react at the same time to this event, and nobody seems comforted. I wonder if this moment is either the result of the people siding with Pharazôn, or if what will be interpreted as the white tree starting to die is the impetus for the big meeting where people are swayed by Farazan that Muriel is to blame for it. I think the former is more likely, but it'll be interesting to see. Next, we see what I think is Theo running from the host of orcs, and Arondir is doing what he can to fend them off. Next, we see orcs gathered and a kind of side shot of the character Adar, their leader. He definitely seems to have pointy ears here, so perhaps he's a fallen elf. It's really hard to say, and his, I think, is the mystery that's actually been talked about the least, and possibly because we've seen the least of it in this show's promotion. The kind of on-the-nose guess would be that he is actually Sauron, but from everything we've heard and rumors that are swirling, he is some kind of lieutenant instead. Next, we have a quick shot of the wandering hobbits above a waterfall in their cart.
Again!
And we're on to another quick shot of the banquet scene with Gil-galad, Celebrimbor, Elrond, Durin IV, and some other elven characters we haven't met yet. We saw in the Elrond and Durin promo that this table they're eating on was hauled in, so this is presumably an impromptu dining hall that the elves made near Khazad-dûm. Next, we have some really quick shots of Nori handing the apple to Meteor Man that we've seen in the posters and the first ever teaser. The body language is kind of interesting here as Meteor Man just kind of walks off, so I wonder if this is earlier in his journey with them where maybe he's not quite sure about them. But hey, who isn't unsure of hobbits popping up in the Second Age, am I right? Next, we see the character of Largo, Nori's father, who delivered the previous lines about their people having hearts even bigger than their feet, which kind of sums up the general deal with hobbits that we know from the Peter Jackson films. Big hearts, big feet. Next, we see a new shot of the sea serpent, which incidentally is something Tolkien references quite briefly in his writings.
Okay.
Fun fact, he also calls them fish dragons. And I will now be using that term for this creature for the foreseeable future.
Please do.
We get a couple shots
cool.
of Halbrand
Fish
and
dragon.
Galadriel in their shipwrecked state, possibly due to the actions of the dreaded fish dragon. Next, we see Arondir tell Bronwyn, "We can survive this, you and I," followed by one of the early shots we had of a group running across some streams. Then we see an
probably
elf
those
at the back
kids.
of Galadriel's company in the frozen region fall down when a second elf stops to help. The second elf says, "Commander, wait," and Galadriel responds, "No, we keep moving," which seems like a very jerkish thing to say and do. If Galadriel isn't careful, she might become more Feanorian than anyone should aspire to be. I honestly have no idea what we're seeing in this shot aside from a distant body of water and some streams. It looks like there's something smoking in the foreground, but I'm watching this on a smaller screen at the moment than usual, and they don't release these things in 4K, so somebody please tell me what this is.
What is
It kind of
that?
looks like a burned out Jeep, but I'm willing to bet
Right?
that's not what it is. Next, we get a quick succession where Halbrand asks Galadriel why she keeps fighting. We see her in a different shot in Numenor saying, "There is a tempest in me," along with a montage of shots we've seen of her scaling the frozen wall and fighting an ice troll. Next, Elrond delivers his line telling Galadriel to put up her sword. Then we see the Numenorian cavalry bowling for orcs. And I gotta say, I don't think this shot is as cool as the trailer editor might have thought it was. As always, I'll judge such things in their proper context when I see them as part of the actual scene. But I can say that watching this back on repeat for this breakdown didn't help a shot that I didn't really notice on my first watch. Next up, we get a quick first look at footage of Elendil's daughter, original character Eärien, which has a vibe of her watching her father and brother sail off to war. Then we get a shot of Arondir doing cool elf stuff. Again, something I think we'll see a fair amount of with this character, as he runs on chains and leaps into the air with an axe. Now what we're seeing here is the orcs attempting to pull the captive elves under the tarps. One thing I like is that we're gonna see orcs affected by sunlight in this series, which really comes into play here. So as the elves try to make a break for it, as was shown in a scene at Comic-Con, the orcs try to stay out of the sun while hauling them back. Here we have Arondir attempting to break down the canopy, exposing the orcs to the sun. I'm pretty certain this scene comes sometime after the scenes in Tirharad, where the orcs attack and Arondir helps people to flee, but gets caught himself in the process. Next, a really quick shot of Elrond and Durin on a lift, which I'm pretty sure we saw the pulley system of in an earlier teaser. Next up is Halbrand leaning off his horse to do something in battle, presumably. Then a shot of Meteor Man yelling and the trees bending around him. I wonder if this is him starting to discover or reveal his power, or possibly part of that earlier scene against the wargs. Next, a close-up shot of Isildur, and there's balls of fire falling in the background. I think there's a couple options here. One is that they are being hurled by devices we've seen in tons of medieval shows and movies before. Isildur definitely has a look on his face that could be interpreted as a young man getting his first glimpse at war. The other option that I find more intriguing is tied to what I think I've determined of the geography of this scene. So we know orcs attack Tirharad, which from the Southlands promo we know lies within the lands that will become Mordor. And with this, we've seen Númenóreans fighting what could be the same orcs in the same location. To me, these orcs don't seem the type that are as organized as, say, the large-scale army that assaulted Minas Tirith in Return of the King. So it'd be kind of odd for them to have catapults. So if there's no catapults, what could the fire be from? My theory is that we are actually witnessing the eruption of Mount Doom.
Really?
We know it's geographically nearby, and who knows, perhaps this is the eruption that begins turning Mordor into the desolate place we know so well from the Third Age. If the fires of Orodruin are awakened and are churning out smoke, it could be the start of making a place more hospitable to the light-averse orcs. Next up, the ship explosion in Númenor, followed by some twirly-whirly sword stuff by Galadriel, and we get the final line of the trailer. In response to Elrond telling her to put up her sword, Galadriel says, "Without it, who am I to be?" And while on the surface you could take this quote and say, the Galadriel who doesn't need a sword, I think that might be the exact point of this quote. The Galadriel we are being given is one that can't see beyond the vengeance for her brother's death. And it's certainly a different one than I expected when this show was announced. But my hope is that by the end of this series, Galadriel arrives at where we would expect her to be leading into the Third Age. Her line here of not knowing who she is without a sword reminds me a bit of Éowyn's story, in that she's so focused on getting into the fight that she can see little else. And one thing we don't get in the Lord of the Rings films that I think is a great character moment for Éowyn is how she's finally able to see past war and battle and turns instead to be a healer and the Lady of Ithilien. I've said it before, but I think what we'll see is a Galadriel who experiences a similar arc. That's just my theory, and who knows what will happen over the coming seasons. But I think there could be a satisfying arc for this character if it indeed became one of her discovering how to put aside her sword and become the elf we know her to be. One final note, I wasn't a big fan of the music track used in this trailer.
Yeah, I know,
the
right?
song on its own
It was
isn't
weird.
good. It just didn't jive for me being used for Lord of the Rings. Call me old-fashioned or whatever, but I prefer tracks that pull me further into Middle-earth. It's probably nothing to worry about in the grand scheme because I don't think it's actually going to be in the show.
Probably.
And the Bear McCreary music has sounded solid thus far. Most notably the Khazad-dûm and Númenor themes, which I think sound fantastic. But I think this song is just another one of those marketing things made for somebody that's definitely not me. Along with things like insinuations of a Galadriel-Halbrand romance, which plays like a Twilight ad or something. No matter how this all plays out, for good or ill, it's nice to know we're at least getting close to actually seeing this show, and we'll soon be able to judge it as a body of work and not merely trailers, press clippings, and rumors.
Okay, so yeah, I have a little bit more faith now that I watched this guy, because I don't know, there was a lot of stuff I guess I just didn't understand or whatever, or maybe I didn't grasp the what could it could possibly mean for some of the series, for the actual series, or maybe I'm just getting too caught up in the whole oh, this show's gonna be terrible, everybody's saying it's so terrible, but I mean, still, you gotta wait. I'm still gonna watch it. I'm still gonna watch it, but I have a little bit more faith now. There's a lot of more interesting things. I actually do think that stranger guy, though, being Gandalf, that actually seems like way too perfect. Can't believe I didn't think of that myself. But yeah, but they're saying that this Halbrand character is Sauron. That's weird. I don't know if I get that. But also, I didn't see that much with Numenor. But yeah, they're. I would love. I hope the Numenor is the center focus, because it's the most interesting part of the Second Age. But yeah, I mean, really, we're just gonna have to wait and see when the show comes out, and it's coming out soon, just a few more days. So, and I'm gonna be doing reactions to it, so stay tuned for that. So, this has been That Sexy Nerd Reacts. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more sexy and nerdy content, and I'll see you all in the next video.